This is a brief tutorial on how to set your color management preferences within Photoshop, and it is dependent on the fact that you will hopefully be working on camera with an Adobe RGB profile. So if you're doing all your photography using the Adobe RGB profile, when you come into Photoshop, Photoshop by default will have an sRGB profile, which is not as rich a color gamut as the Adobe RGB. So we need to set the right color management within Photoshop so that there are no conflicts. To do that, simply open up Photoshop, and once you have Photoshop active, go into the Edit menu, and under the Edit menu towards the lower half, you have something called Color Settings. Click in here. When you open up Color Settings, the default that you should have would be a North America General Purpose 2. And the whole management system has been divided into different sections. One is the working spaces, the second is the color management policies, third is the conversion options, and then finally the advanced controls. To understand what each one of these do really, all you need to do is move the cursor onto any one of the options, and at the bottom, the fifth little space right at the bottom, it will give you a description of what that option is all about. For our purposes, what we need to do very briefly is change this sRGB to an Adobe RGB profile. With CMYK, since we're not dealing with CMYK at this point in time, I'm going to leave it to the default, which is US Web Coded Swap version 2. I'm going to leave the gray to a dot, gain 20%, because we're not going to be actually converting any images directly into a grayscale, but we'll be working with, at a later stage, RGB images, which will then look like great grayscale continuous tone images. Spot colors are not of our concern. When it comes to color management policies, if you click on the drop down menu where it says preserve embedded profiles, if you click in here, you have an option of switching it off or checking on to convert to working profile. My personal preference is to click on convert to working profiles, because when I do that, then I have an option over here of checking any one of these three boxes, where in the event that any image has a profile mismatch, I'll check this button because it's going to ask me when it opens the image. Photoshop is going to then ask a question. What would you like to do? Would you like to convert or leave it to the working profile? In the event that any image may have a missing profile, or a profile has not been embedded with the image, you can check on Ask When Opening. When it comes to Ask When Pasting, if you've already got this option active where it says if there's a profile mismatch, Ask When Opening, Ask When Pasting doesn't really make much of a difference because you would have already made the choice at this point in time. Conversion options, you need to leave it to the Adobe. In terms of the intent, you can go through each one of them. At this point in time, I would suggest leave it to relative color metric, and to understand what it does, just keep your cursor on this drop down which says relative color metric and read up on the description at the bottom. Use black point compensation, I would leave it checked. Use dither 8 bits per channel per imp for the image, I would leave it checked. Compensate for scene referred profiles doesn't really apply to photography directly, but more if you were working with After Effects or any other application. In the advanced controls area, desaturate monitor colors by 20% or 10%. This is a default value and it will be unchecked by default. A bit of an issue because most of the commercial, or let's say monitors that you pick up, for a couple of $100 or something, they are not the best viewing monitors, and by default what they do is they make the image look very rich and bright because inherently the flat panels tend to have a very high contrast range. So we're going to actually talk about how to do, or at least attempt to do monitor calibrations without any additional calibration devices like a spider or any other monitor calibration device. So for now, let's leave it alone, and we're going to deal with this at another point in time. Once you have done this basic stuff, just click on save, and then you can give it a name over here, and whatever name that you wish to. What I had done in the past was I had given it a name as um, photo print digital, because I'm going to sort of work with it from here on and say, okay, I'm going to be working all with the Adobe RGB because I'm creating these files to go into print at a later stage, and Adobe is an easier thing to work with because it'll be consistent, hopefully. And I just click save, and I can then give in any further directions, instructions for myself to recall in the event that I wish to. So I'm just going to say photo workflow for eventual print production digital on Epson. So this is my own reference, and once I've done that, I'm going to hit OK. And you notice that now the name comes up which says photo print digital. Once I'm done, I'm OK. And the moment you say OK, for future times to come, hopefully this is what will stay within Photoshop, and that'll be the default. If you would need to change it to another workflow, you will have to go back into color settings and then modify the whole thing. And that's about it.